Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's me Parker, and today I do want to discuss Warhammer 3. Now before I actually get into it, I just want to say that I will get into depth about possible mechanics and the game in detail in future. But in this one, I want to discuss the more interesting and juicy parts of the game, which would be the races and factions that may be a part of it. And just note, I will be listing races more than actually going into depth, because I will do that in a separate video in which I will be going more properly into depth about mechanics and lore and all that sort of stuff for the separate factions. I may actually go into a part 2 as well about factions that may come in DLC or that are unlikely to make an appearance, and also factions that won't be playable but will probably be in game, such as the Kurgans, which would be pretty awesome because they're like more Marauder peak, basically Norse but east, like the Mongols, yeah, Mongols. Anyway, at number 1 I'm going to list off Kislev, and I'm starting off with this faction because, as you all know, even though it is in the game, it certainly isn't playable, and as far as the game is concerned, it pretty much is the same as the Empire, which doesn't make much sense. Kislev is very much separate from the Empire and is certainly unique, as it is the first line of defense when it comes to chaos, and as they must pass through Kislev before they enter the Empire and other lands. This, along with the unique geography of politics of Kislev, would make for some very interesting gameplay. There is already a decent roster for Kislev in the lore, such as the Kossars, the Streltsy, Ungol Horse Archers, Wing Lancers, Heavy Heavy Cavalry, sorry, and also have siege artillery such as cannons and mortars. As for heroes, they have witches and melee heroes, as well as spies, and have their own lore called the Lore of Ice. The obvious choice for a legendary lord would be Katarina. However, I'm not sure who would be the second legendary lord, and if anything is to go by, it would probably be her father, even though he's dead before the end times. But you know, it'd be pretty cool. Now, as for the battle against Chaos, it would make sense that they would have a bonus versus Chaos and Norska, perhaps having a leadership buff and a melee attack and melee defense bonus when fighting them. Additionally, the land of Kislev is basically cold and inhospitable, like Norska, so they may share some traits, such as being immune to snow attrition, or at least reduce the attrition by half. Lords and heroes may increase that attrition reduction with skills, and would probably be also in the tech tree. Buildings are pretty important as well, and being separate from the Empire, they may have some unique building chains, such as maybe a hunter's lodge or just a hut, which may further reduce attrition, and may also allow recruitment of certain archers or huntsmen, such as the Siberian hunters, which would basically have, I suspect, bonus versus large, being hunters and all hunting, bears and all sorts of nasties in the wilderness. Now that is them over. At number 2 would be the Demons of Chaos. This faction may swing either way, being put in the roster of the Warriors of Chaos, or maybe being an entirely different faction. The latter, however, is by far the likeliest, because even though the Warriors of Chaos are basically human or mutated, all that nasty stuff, whereas the demons are basically entirely separate in basically a completely 180, being actually a part of the gods themselves. So that's basically what the Demons of Chaos are. They're creatures of the warp, created by dark gods themselves, a splinter of their master in order to do their bidding. And just like how the dark gods are actually different from each other, their denizens are exactly the same. The Demons of Khorne are, well, they're full of bloodlust, preferring violence, slaughter, and brute force in order to achieve their goals. Demons of Nurgle are arguably the hardest to kill, being disgustingly resilient and, well, disgusting. They're full of disease, rot, and spread it wherever they go. The Demons of Tzeentch detest combat, preferring sorcery and deceit. And finally, the Demons of Slaanesh, being lithe and whip and quick, and sticking things where things should never be stuck. Now, you could have your campaign based on a god that you choose. For example, Skarbrand, could be the legendary Lord of Khorne, and have a campaign that focuses purely on violence and magic, would either be completely non-existent or be very rare and full of drawbacks. For Nurgle, you could have, I don't know how to pronounce much of these, Kugarth Plaguefather as his legendary lord. His campaign focused on spreading rot and having forces that are incredibly difficult to kill, potentially with damage resistance, lots of health, or even both. Slaanesh may have the Mask of Slaanesh, dancing demonette essentially. Campaign can be focused on fast, agile infantry and cavalry. It may play similar to the Witch Elves or the Dark Elves, you never know. And finally we have Tzeentch, and its legendary lord could be Kyra's Fate Weaver, with a campaign focusing on sorcery and deceit. Hopefully you'll be able to play either an individual god or have the choice to play as Chaos and Divided, the latter of which would buy from certain mechanics and parts of the tech tree, if, you know, if there is one, which there probably will be actually, but you never know, it's Chaos. As I said, there will be far more to discuss in a dedicated video, but, you know. Now then, the Chaos Dwarves. Oh yeah, these are the juicy ones. The Chaos Dwarves are also known as the dawi-zhaar. These guys are the evil little cousins of the dwarves, wielding fire and metal and devastating firepower with artillery that would make the Empire blush. Much like the Dark Elves, the economy of this faction would rely mainly on slaves, but put a much bigger focus on orcs and goblins. They don't worship the four main chaos gods, however they do worship the more minor god Hashut. Because of this, the dawi-zhaar is able to wield sorcery using a law called the Law Hashut, which focuses on fire, ash and just all around devastation. Hailing from the Darklands, originally a part of the regular dwarves, but travelled to the Mountains of Morn in search of other lands and minerals and that, because, you know, mountains, they've got valuable stuff. But by the time the Storm of Chaos arrived, they were cut off. And now they're twisted and evil. The basic melee units would include orc slaves, which would include black orcs, which would, I believe, come into play with campaign mechanics, maybe rebelling if you have too much, if you have too few certain buildings, for example. The Chaos Dwarves is also a cannon unit, and maybe slightly more powerful than the regular Dwarf Warriors, but would pretty much be the same, having high armor, high morale, and having high mass. An example of an elite unit would be the Infernal Guard, and as for ranged units, they have blunderbusses, which would be devastating at close range, hobgoblin archers, which would be longer range but less damage, and I suspect that they would have similar weapons to that of the Dwarven Thunderers, you know, because dwarves, and firepower and gunpowder and stuff like that. But the infantry isn't, basically, the infantry isn't what you're massively interested in, though. It's the war machines. Demon-infused engines such as the Hell Cannon, Dreadquake Mortar, and they've even got a siege giant used for smashing down walls and gates, which is pretty metal if you ask me. And also, considering where they live, I would assume they would have a resistance to fire, as well as no attrition in barren wastelands, like, you know, where the orcs are in Warhammer 1 and Mortal Empires. And would have absolutely no attrition to Chaos Corruption as well, I would hope, because, you know, Chaos Dwarves. All in all, the dawi-zhaar would be a very, very powerful faction and would be unbeatable in siege battles. Until you get to the next one, the Ogre Kingdoms. The Ogre Kingdoms are always hungry and always plundering that inhabit the Mountains of Morn. They are hulking beasts cursed to forever have a need to consume. Anything and everything goes. They defeat the Sky Titans, battle against the forces of Cathay, and sell themselves out as mercenaries, an enticing prospect for any general. Their god, the Great Maul, is not just an icon of devotion, but also fear, being responsible for the near extinction of the entire ogre race. Though it may have just been a meteorite mixed with the overly superstitious nature of the ogres, the constant worship of this deity may have actually manifested them more into the warp, which explains why the ogres have their own law of magic, known as gut magic. The ogres are also rather resistant to chaos, which would be rather important in the game, as the Chaos Dwarves are only to the east in the Darklands, and then there is a Chaos Waste to the north, where the Kurgans would be. Because of this, they may have less of a penalty due to the presence of chaotic corruption, but I'm guessing a more likely scenario would be a bonus to Untainted for chaotic corruption, maybe like +5 to +10 bonus for negating chaos. And the Lords and Heroes may have an extra point in negative chaotic corruption, as well as have a good amount in a tech tree. But regardless of that, ogre units would be absolutely devastating, with high mass and with massive amounts of damage, with unit sizes that would be around that of trolls, around 8 to 12 in a unit, I would think. The ranged weaponry would be equally devastating, effectively hand-carrying cannons, which would be awesome for sieges. The cavalry would be some of the most powerful in the game, and they have siege weapons that, it rivals that of the Chaos Squad essentially. They also have the fair share of lords and heroes, such as the Ogre Tyrant and the Slaughter Master, latter of which is a magic user. For heroes, they have Butchers, which are their cooks and magicians, Five Bellies, which are the priests, and the Bruiser, which is essentially an enforcer for the ogres and a brutal melee combatant. So, yeah, the ogres have their fair share of stuff as well. These four are the four main factions I would see in the base game. Now, I will make a second one, which will be additional 5, which is DLC, unlikely, or just in the game in general, but probably won't be playable. So there we have it, just the 4 basic races for Warhammer 3. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah, see you soon, folks. Ta-ta for now.